This program was recorded with a live audience. Please forgive the occasional sound fluctuations.
I'm going to say a little bit about Focus, Faith, Heals, and I'm going to be telling you about how I got into all of this, because as you will begin to understand from my own testimony, this wasn't a very likely outcome to have me being in the position that I'm in to talk about the things that I'm going to talk about. A most unlikely sequence of events, actually. So Focus, Faith, Heals is a teaching program, and it's a program that's based on concepts that I've had revealed to me by the Lord in my own personal life, even before I knew God existed, even before I became a Christian. God was working in my life to show me things that I'm going to be sharing with everyone. And as that process occurred, it became more and more obvious that there was something at work that was far beyond what I was able to see, or far beyond I was able to put my fingers on. It was an invisible spiritual reality that began to occur in my life. And that's what has led me to this. But let me just start by saying that I had a knowledge of the truth within as a little kid growing up. I'm from a family with my dad was a family doctor. I have 5 brothers, one of 6 boys in a family. We grew up with all the right values, with all the right morals, with all the right ethics, but with absolutely no knowledge of God whatsoever, and no reliance on anything other than something that we could muster up within ourselves. So we were growing up with the philosophy that we were not limited, but there was nothing outside of ourselves that was going to contribute to anything in our lives. If you couldn't muster it up in your own person, then it just wasn't going to become a reality, which put all the onus on the individual, all the onus on us as individuals. And so with that as a background, I had this knowledge within as a little child that there was something in human beings that gave them an extraordinary potential to be successful and to live the highest quality of life to their desires. And I don't know where that came from, but I had that knowledge, and I remember hearing my parents and hearing other people in school and hearing my friends talk about other individuals, and I would hear who they were talking about. And I would think to myself, well, that isn't the same concept, that isn't the same perception I have of that person. I've been blessed and gifted with the ability to look at human beings and look at humanity and see the good in every single human being that I've ever encountered. In 35 years of practicing medicine, in some of the most difficult human life trials, tragedies, circumstances, and situations, I can't ever remember a cross word that I ever had with another human being. I never left the presence of another human being with anything other than the highest regard for that person, and I think that worked both ways. So I had that I call it a giftedness, and I had also a knowledge that I was going to become a servant to mankind. And of course, my dad was a family doctor, and I saw him in his life and carrying out his medical practice and the goodness of his heart towards humanity, and that was a great model to follow. But even above and beyond that, there was a knowledge that there was a calling there that was coming from within. There was a small voice that was coming from within. And I will actually, in the course of this course, I will show you exactly where that voice from within originates, down to the molecular level, that we all have that voice within. And that very rarely do we ever develop the knowledge and skill to listen to that voice within. But that voice within is at work as we're speaking right now. That voice is within. And that voice has the knowledge of right and wrong within each and every human being. That voice is also the source, I think, of all knowledge. And I always say at the beginning of these courses that I'm probably not going to teach anybody anything that you don't already know. I'm convinced that the principles that I'm going to be talking about here, and this is because this is what people have told me, and this is what my own intuition tells me about myself and about the knowledge of humanity, that is that I'm not going to teach anything you don't already know. All I'm going to do is remind you of what you have already forgotten. You've got the knowledge. And I say that because when we discuss some of these principles and precepts and concepts that, I mean, some of the greatest minds in the world are just coming to realize now in the world of intellect, in the world of thought, you and I have had this information as well as every other human being has had this information instilled within them from the very get-go. It goes all the way back to originating in the mind of God. And we carry that information throughout our lives. And we have an internal technology that we're going to be discussing in great depth and detail through the course of this teaching. And it's going to build week in and week out. We have an internal technology that prior to today's time, it was almost incomprehensible for us to understand. I certainly didn't understand it because it's unseen. And it goes beyond molecules. And we're going to talk about molecules. We're going to talk about atoms and electrons and protons and the very substance and foundation of the universe. But we're also going to be talking about the substance of faith. And faith is a substance. And faith is a substance that flows. And I will show you and I will connect the dots in this course that shows you that the substance of faith has been recently discovered by particle physicists in the string theory of physics. That is the current foundational scientific information source for the structure of the very basis of the universe. And if you follow this scientific trail of knowledge, it leads us to the concept that the very foundation of everything in the universe is this substance of faith. And if you take the substance of faith and extrapolate it back even further, more foundational, more fundamental, I will show you that that is Jesus. That Jesus is the foundational structure of the entire universe. Everything in the universe can be extrapolated down to the presence of Jesus. That's on a molecular level, that's on a neuroscientific level, that's on a cardiovascular physiology level, that's on every single level of endeavor that we have. And why is that important? Because there is a book that reveals all that to us. And here I spent my entire lifetime reading books to understand life. That was my basic question and plea to God for my own life, my own pursuit, was that God revealed to me the truth of life, and it's all contained right here, and we will show that as we go through this process. So let's take a look at how God constructed man in order to be this organism through which he could literally have a relationship with. How did he make this? And we're getting in now to our humanity. So he made us, as it says in the Bible, we are spirit, soul, and body. We're three parts. And he made us out of the dust of the ground, and he breathed air into us. That's our spirit. That's our spiritual context, breathing air into us. So our spirit, the central part in this well-characterized diagram, originating, I think, with Watchman Nee, shows that the spirit is made up of three things. It's made up of our conscience. Oh, sorry. It's made up of our conscience. It's made up of our ability to commune, our ability to relate to God, and it's made up of our intuition. That's that voice inside that we all have within us. We all have the ability to talk to God within us. Unfortunately, if you're like me, you get involved in life and you get so chaotic in your life that you extinguish that recognition of God's voice within. But when you start focusing on that, it becomes more evident, and you'll find that He's speaking to us all the time. We're probably not hearing a small percentage of it. So there's conscience, there's communion, and there's intuition. Those are the aspects of our spirit. Well, what is there in our soul? Our soul is made up of reason and logic in our brain. It's made up of our emotion, which is in our brain, and our will. God gave us free choice. We can take it or leave it. He doesn't force anything on us. And then He gave us a body. He gave us a physical body through which we sense what's going on in this universe, in this life of ours. We are the God's gates and channels. We are the way He feels the universe. Our body is our feeling mechanism. The human body, most people have a misperception of the body, and they incriminate the body and associate it with the flesh. The flesh is our sinning part of our being, but it's not the body. I mean, we have a phenomenal body. I mean, God created this phenomenal mechanism. Good night. It's unbelievably complex. We're just beginning to scratch the surface of it. I mean, our body is nothing to crucify or incriminate. Our body is what senses. It's where we get our feelings, and our feelings come from a combination of what we think and what our emotions are. When we think and when we emote, that creates a cascade of chemicals that get injected out into our body, which gives us the physical sensation of what we're living through. You know, if you're living through something of fear, you're going to get butterflies in your stomach. If you're living through something where there's deep appreciation and love, you're going to get a heaviness in your heart, which gives you an idea of how God manifests Himself. He manifests Himself through not only our brain, but He also manifests Himself through our heart and also our gut. We have a brain in our gut. We have a brain in our heart. We have a brain in our head. We have three brains. If you take that same diagram that I went over here with body, spirit, and soul, and these are just fundamental things here until we're working up to getting actually into the brain and how the brain handles everything. But so here are these three things here. So where is the heart? So if you take a cross section out of here, okay, these two lines right here, you take this cross section out. So here's the cross section. Here's the spirit, here's the soul, and here's the body. So where is the heart? And in the history of my own education on this and evaluation of this, I couldn't figure it out, that's for sure. Watchman Nee, in all of his writings and in all of his sermons, talked about the spirit being, or the heart being 2/3 spirit and 1/3 soul. And in the faith movement of later years of Kenneth Hagin and that generation, they more talked about the heart being all spirit. You get the distinction? Okay. Well, I tell you, God is so consistent, and but just most people, when they're exercising, they're thinking about what? They're thinking about their body. That's what they're doing. They're exercising their body. So their consciousness, their attention is down here. So this is what the heart looks like. So the heart is a moving target. That's important to realize because we have to continually remind ourselves, where is our heart? Because as you will learn, the heart is the organ that has the greatest ability to communicate with God. So wherever our heart is should be of prime attention to us. because that's the organ through which we receive, and that's the organ through which we communicate with God. Is that understandable, clear there? So just again to begin with, I wanted to just call attention to where I want to try to get started tonight with our mindset. And last week and the week before last, you heard Judy relate to you her personal experience with her healing. And I wanted to kind of use that as a springboard to try to explain certain aspects of how that whole process occurred. And one of the most important aspects of healing and opening up the floodgates to the flow of faith, which we all have. We all have, if you have Christ and you're filled with the Holy Spirit, you've got the perfect faith of Christ in you. Faith isn't something that you have to muster up. I mean, it's already there. You've already got it. It's not something that you have to work to build. It's already there. But there's an impediment to the outflow of faith. And as I've said from the get-go, our task here and what our purpose here is to have each one of us come into a reality and a realization of what it is that's impeding this perfected faith that we have in us flowing through our body. Faith flows. You can conceptualize everything that flows. Can be stopped, it can be started, and it can be regulated. I don't care whether you're talking about the flowing of water, the flowing of electricity, the flow of anything, and faith flows. That means that faith can be shut off, it can be started, it can also be regulated, it can be directed. And God has endowed each and every one of us with the capability to do all of those things to faith that we have. So the impediment to faith are these red clamps on this tubing through which the faith flows through the human organism, through each one of us as individuals. And the quickest way to shut down the flow of faith, and you'll see here that I've got the soul divided into two separate containers. I've got the carnal mind and I've got the spiritual mind separated. Because the carnal mind is the last impediment before you get to the body with the flow of faith. And the Bible calls it the carnal mind. Our carnal mind is shut off instantaneously with any threat of judgment, any threat of fear, any threat of condemnation, any threat of valuation shuts the doorway out of the carnal mind. Faith can be flowing through, can be opened up. These can all be removed. Faith can come through. You can be as spiritually minded as possible. And all of a sudden, when the flow comes into the carnal mind, it hits a stone wall. And it's condemnation and judgment that does that. You know, there's not one single place in the New Testament, in all of the interpersonal relationships that are recorded there with Jesus, no matter who he taught to, there's not one place that he is condemning or passing valuation on another human being. And this brings me to why Judy had an instantaneous healing. Because I've seen that with Judy, and she's the one that related the story to you, but that's what I've seen every single time I've seen an instantaneous healing. I have seen a person obtain their healing from a position of not being judged, not being valuated, having no sense of condemnation whatsoever toward them. They're totally free. And that's what Jesus came to do, right? He came to set us free. Because that's the only way that we'll ever see and experience and live in the truth is through total freedom. So you have to begin to separate yourself from your soul and your body. You are not your soul, and you are not your body. if you are, we're all in for it. Because I see a whole lot of imperfect souls and bodies here. Me, the biggest offender. I got baling wire holding my chest together, got steel rods holding my back together, got batteries keeping my heart operating. I mean, I'm the least picture of a perfect soul or body. So you have to remember that this is your spirit. This is your spirit. This is who you really are. You can't change it. This is who you really are. Now that spirit is covered up with a soul, and the red glove is indicative of your soul. That's your reasonable, your ability to reason, exercise logic, will, and emotions. That's your soul. And then your physical body covers up your soul. So now here you are. Now, God has given us the full capability to, through what we've seen, by the change that we have the ability to literally change our human genome. We can turn genes on, and we can turn genes off by how we think and by what we believe. So the genome is what controls these things out here. So we literally have the capability to, if we want to, and we go about it using the Word of God as our truthful guide, we can literally change our soul and our body. Still got the same spirit here, because that's who we really are. That's the information that God injected out into the universe for us. So we can put on a brand spanking new soul, and we can cover that soul up with a brand spanking another body. But remember, here's where you really are. This is who you really are. As soon as you begin to identify yourself as this, you've stopped the flow of faith through your body. And when Judy had her instantaneous healing, the reason that she was able to heal instantaneously was because she did not feel condemned, because all of a sudden her personal problem became this molecule's problem. Now let that soak in. Her problem became that molecule's problem. You heard her own testimony. She came over and she started replacing these molecules herself. She did it. She enacted it. She willfully did it. She knew it needed to be done. How far do you think she'd have gotten if I'd have said, Jude, the reason that you're having problems is because you're holding resentment. You're holding unresolved anger. Now, if I'd have told her that, her carnal mind would have said, I'm feeling judged. I'm feeling condemned. And I love her, so I wouldn't want her to feel that way. But that's how sensitive the human organism is. As soon as you get a whiff of being judged or being condemned, you shut down and you stop the work of God in your life. That's why Jesus repeatedly in his teaching and in his interpersonal relationships with his disciples talked about living in the kingdom of God. Living in the kingdom. Kingdom living is living like you have absolutely nothing to be condemned for. That's what he wants us. That's how he wants us to live. Because we don't have anything to be condemned for. He's already paid for every single thing that every person in this room has been whipping themselves over for their entire lifetime has been for naught. It's given you a heartache, it's given you sorrow, it's given you ulcers, it's given you colitis, it's given you migraine headaches. And Jesus said, I'm going to take care of all that for you. All you have to do is rest in it. And that period of rest is living in a state of absolute absolution from anything that anybody could even do to cause you to be condemned or judged. You take those things out of the equation, and all things are possible with God. Because you've just taken the shackles off of the most potent force on in this universe, and that's the love of God. That we are obstacles to the flow of that love. So I want you to get into we're going to be talking about the brain, and we're going to be talking about how we receive information from the universe. And as we're doing this, I want you to realize, I want you to step away from your life. I want you to step out here as your spirit and look at yourself the way you should look at yourself. And that is from the perspective of the way God looks at you, and He looks at you as a perfected spirit. And He looks at you separate from your soul and your body. He knows that everybody in this room, and this is one of the things that God just gave me the giftedness to be able to look at every single human being and see that every single human being in their own way, shape, and form is doing their dead level best to do the best they can with their life. I'm totally convinced of that. Nobody is going to convince me any differently than that. Because every single person I've talked to, I don't care whether we're talking about the homeless that I've spent years talking to and trying to evaluate, or what it is, every single person is doing their dead level best. I never met anybody in my life who has said, you know, the day I was born, I wanted to be a bum. Or the day I was born, I wanted to be an outcast. Or the day I was born, I wanted to be a chronically ill. Nobody ever wants those kind of things to happen to them in their life. But somewhere along the way in life, we wake up one day and we look at ourselves and we think, my goodness, all of this stuff that I had dread for, it's all happening. Why is it happening? And I'm going to show you tonight. We're going to get into the mechanisms of how self-defeating, self-replicating behavior patterns, thought patterns get set up in our soul and in our body, and before we know it, we're living out self-fulfilling prophecies of doom in our lives. And I'm telling you, you're being hijacked. It's a hijacking. There's not one person in here when I would ask you, and I'm not going to ask you this, but if I did ask you this, how many people would raise their hand to say that they've set their life up so that they can totally fail in life? I mean, in people's heart of hearts, that's anti-creation. You don't create a living organism to the extent that God created us to have that happen. So try to separate yourself from your soul and your body and realize that that's not who you are. Who you are is your spirit. And the reflection of who you are, therefore, is to be found in this book right here. This identifies you as who you are. Now, there are a few of us in this room right here who are totally living the way this book identifies us. Do you remember looking back at the living organisms under the microscope in biology class and seeing on TV little bugs and little paramecium and amoeba are all looking around and searching around and everything? Do you know what these organisms are all doing? They're looking for their identity. They're searching the environment through chemical means, molecular means, all kinds of receptors, all kinds of chemical molecules, searching their environment for their environment to tell them who they are. And then they adapt to the situation that they find themselves in, and that's how they survive. Unfortunately, the adversary has given us the same capability. He's deceived us into looking outside of this word right here to seek our own identity, so we begin to believe what the world tells us we are.